I thought I was infertile for years, but then I found out my sister used my eggs to have her baby. I always wanted to be a mother. Even when I was a little girl, I used to cradle my dolls in my arms and pretend they were real babies. While other kids dreamed of careers or castles, I dreamed of lullabies and bedtime stories, of tiny feet padding across hardwood floors and warm chubby arms wrapping around my neck. My name is Emma, and being a mom wasn't just something I wanted, it was everything I believed I was meant to be. But life has a cruel sense of humor. At 26, after trying and failing for years to get pregnant with my husband Michael, I finally saw a fertility specialist. I still remember the doctor's words: clinical, cold, final. Premature ovarian failure, he said. Your body isn't producing viable eggs. I'm sorry, Emma, but you won't be able to conceive naturally. I stared at the white walls of that office like they were closing in around me. Something inside me crumbled that day. I wasn't sick, not in a way anyone could see, but it felt like a part of me had died. I left the clinic in silence, the prescription papers clenched in my hand like a death certificate for a life I'd never live. Michael was supportive at first. He said all the right things. We can adopt. We still have options. It's not your fault. But slowly, I felt the distance between us growing. He stopped coming to appointments. He worked late. He flinched when he saw baby ads on TV. And then one night, after another tense silence at dinner, he finally said it. I didn't sign up for this. 2 weeks later, he was gone. Just like that, my marriage, my future, was gone. My home was quiet, still, sterile. I moved back in with my parents for a while after the divorce. I was 30, childless, heartbroken, and hollow. My little sister, Sophie, still lived there too. She was younger than me by 4 years, always the wild one, impulsive, emotional, but charming in that messy, irresistible way. She was the kind of person who stumbled into good luck while I planned every step. Sophie and I were never the same. Where I was cautious and dependable, she was chaotic and loud. But she was my sister. I loved her even when she drove me crazy. She tried to cheer me up in her own clumsy way, inviting me to brunch, sending me memes, dragging me to yoga classes. But even her bright energy couldn't reach the place inside me that had gone dark. I'd watch her laugh, toss her hair, flirt with every guy in the room, and wonder how she got to live so lightly while I was drowning. I tried to move on. I poured myself into work. I even tried dating again, awkward first dates, forced smiles, polite goodnights. But every time I saw a child in a stroller or a mother holding her baby, it felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I stopped going to baby showers. I avoided family events. It was too much. Then, one day, everything shifted. I came home from work and found Sophie sitting at the kitchen table with a dazed look on her face. She looked up at me and whispered, I'm pregnant. I blinked. Wait, what? She nodded slowly, tears gathering in her eyes. I don't even know how to feel. I mean, it wasn't exactly planned. I froze. Sophie had always been careless, but this was beyond reckless. With who? I asked cautiously. She shrugged. Some guy from work. We weren't serious. He's already ghosted me. I didn't know what to say. Part of me was furious. How could she treat something I wanted so desperately like a mistake? And yet another part of me ached for her. She looked genuinely scared. Despite everything, I supported her. I went with her to ultrasounds. I held her hair when she threw up in the mornings. I drove her to prenatal yoga. I painted the baby's room in pale green and yellow. I even threw her a baby shower, carefully masking my grief under layers of cake and balloons. When her daughter, Lily, was born, I held her tiny body in my arms and felt something ignite inside me. She was beautiful. Round cheeks, a tuft of dark hair, sleepy blue eyes. She looked nothing like Sophie, but she looked familiar. Still, I told myself I was imagining it. Babies change every day, right? And besides, genetics are weird. I became Aunt Emma, the doting, ever-present helper. I changed diapers, bought her clothes, even paid for daycare when Sophie was struggling financially. I loved Lily fiercely, but always from a distance. She wasn't mine. Or so I thought. Years passed. Lily grew into a smart, curious little girl with the same dimple I had as a child, the same stubborn chin, the same nervous tick of biting her lower lip when she was thinking. Once, when she was 4, a stranger at the park smiled at me and said, "Your daughter's adorable." "Oh, she's my niece," I replied, laughing awkwardly. The woman tilted her head. "Really? She looks just like you." The comment unsettled me, but I brushed it off. Coincidence, I thought. Nothing more. I pushed the doubt away for years. Because what else could I do? I wasn't going to accuse my sister of. Of what, exactly? It sounded crazy. Paranoid. Desperate. But then came the day I couldn't ignore it anymore. It started with a simple mistake. Sophie left her laptop open on the kitchen counter one morning when she was rushing out for work. I was cleaning up after Lily's breakfast, about to close it when an email notification popped up in the corner of the screen. Subject: Frozen embryo transfer. Confirmation for Emma W. I froze. My name. On her laptop. Attached to an IVF clinic I hadn't contacted in years. My heart started pounding. I clicked the email. What I saw made the room spin. The email thread was from a fertility clinic. It confirmed a successful embryo transfer. Using eggs retrieved under my name. My medical ID, my donor profile. The timestamp was from 5 years ago, around the time I was told I had no viable eggs left. There were other emails. Legal documents. Consent forms. All forged, all signed with my name. And in the corner of one scanned form, I saw it as scribbled note. Transfer for recipient. Sophie M. I dropped into the nearest chair and just stared at the screen, numb. It didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. But deep down, I already knew the truth. Lily wasn't just my niece. She was my biological daughter. My own flesh and blood. And Sophie, my sister, my blood, the person I cried to, confided in, supported through everything, had stolen her from me. She had used my stolen fertility records to get pregnant. She had gone to my doctor, pretending to be me. She had lied to my face for years while I held my daughter in my arms, thinking she was someone else's. I sat in the kitchen for hours, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound, my hands shaking, my stomach in knots. Grief, anger, confusion, betrayal, all of it swirled in my chest like a storm. I had to be wrong. There had to be an explanation. So I did what no aunt should ever have to do. I stole a strand of Lily's hair from her hairbrush. And I sent it for a DNA test, matching it against my own. When the results came back, I sat in my car and sobbed until I couldn't breathe. 99.9% match. Mother and child. I wasn't infertile. I was robbed. And now it was time to make Sophie pay. I sat in my car with the DNA report trembling in my hands, the sun casting long shadows across the dashboard as evening crept in. My heart wasn't beating, it was thundering. My head felt like it might explode from the pressure. I must have read the word mother 20 times, each repetition a blade slicing deeper into my chest. Lily was mine. My daughter. And Sophie had known it all along. I thought I'd cry more, I thought the grief would swallow me whole. But as I sat there, something colder than tears settled in my bones, rage. A rage so sharp, so pure, it burned away every ounce of sorrow and left me hollow and dangerous. She stole my child. She looked me in the eye every day, let me hold her, babysit her, bathe her, knowing full well what she'd done. And still, she said nothing. Lied, laughed. Let me ache and crumble under the weight of my own infertility, while she walked around with my daughter in her arms. I needed answers. I needed the truth. But more than that, I needed justice. I didn't confront her that night. No, that would have been too easy. Too emotional. I knew Sophie. She thrived in drama, in chaos, in twisting everything until she came out the victim. If I stormed in screaming, she'd cry, deny, spin. I wouldn't get the truth. I'd get another performance. So I waited. I played dumb. For 3 days, I acted normal. I took Lily to school. I asked Sophie how work was. I cooked dinner. I even smiled. But inside, I was watching everything. How Sophie avoided my gaze when she spoke, how she flinched every time I mentioned my fertility struggles, how she looked at Lily just a little too possessively, like a thief protecting stolen treasure. Then came the moment I needed. We were in the kitchen. Sophie had just come home from a night out, a little tipsy, her hair messy, heels in her hand. Lily was asleep upstairs. I was washing dishes, pretending to hum to myself when she said it. You know, she slurred slightly. I still don't get why you didn't try IVF more seriously. You might have had a chance. I froze. She didn't notice. She poured herself a glass of wine and plopped down at the table. You gave up too fast, she said. That's all I'm saying. People fight for what they want. I turned off the faucet slowly, drying my hands with mechanical precision. Then I turned to her, calm, deliberate, and said, You mean like you did? Her brow furrowed. What? I took the DNA report from the drawer, where I'd placed it, waiting for this exact moment, and laid it on the table in front of her. Fight for what you want, I repeated, voice low. Even if it means stealing it from your own sister. Her face went white. Dead white. Like blood had abandoned her body entirely. What? What is this? She whispered. Don't insult my intelligence, Sophie. Her hands trembled as she picked up the paper. You had her tested? She's my daughter, I said, my voice cracking for the first time. Sophie opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Emma, I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I blinked slowly. Like what exactly? You accidentally forged my consent forms? You accidentally stole my medical files? You accidentally walked into a clinic and pretended to be me? She started crying then. Big, ugly, messy sobs. I was desperate, okay? I didn't think I could ever have kids. I went to your doctor once, just to ask what you did, and they thought I was you, and it just happened. And then when they said they had viable embryos left, I couldn't say no. You couldn't say no? I hissed. To what, stealing my child? I didn't steal her, she yelled, standing up. You weren't using them. You left them there. You didn't even want to try anymore. I stared at her, stunned. Left them there? You talk about my embryos like they were forgotten lunch leftovers. Sophie's voice cracked. You had everything, Emma. The perfect job, the husband, the perfect life. I was always the screw-up. Always second. You didn't even see it, but I was drowning. No one ever looked at me the way they looked at you. I shook my head. So you decided to become me. You used my eggs, gave birth to my child, and lied to my face for 5 years. And you think I'm the problem? I didn't plan it to be like this, she whispered. But you let it stay this way. Silence. Then she said the thing that broke me. She's mine now, Emma. You can't change that. She said it without blinking. Like it was settled. Like I was supposed to just accept it. And I realized. She wasn't sorry. She never had been. She had spent years building this fantasy life around my stolen daughter, and now that the truth was out, she expected me to go back to being the helpful aunt. To disappear. I couldn't. I wouldn't. But I also knew the courts wouldn't help me. The law is slow. Cold. It cares about custody, not justice. On paper, Sophie was Lily's legal mother. And as long as I didn't have ironclad proof of identity theft or forgery, I'd be seen as the crazy aunt trying to rip a child away from the only parent she'd ever known. No. If I wanted to get Lily back, I needed more than justice. I needed revenge. Precise, cold, psychological revenge. I started small. I told Sophie I needed some time to process everything, and she bought it. Of course she did. She always thought I was weak, emotionally fragile, easy to manipulate. So I pretended to retreat. I told her I was moving out. I packed a bag, kissed Lily on the head, and said, I'll visit soon, sweetheart. Then I started digging. I contacted the fertility clinic. They wouldn't tell me anything at first. Privacy laws, they said. But I had names now. Dates. Paperwork. I pressed. I hinted at legal action. Eventually, someone cracked. One of the nurses remembered Sophie. She remembered how Emma, looked different than her photo ID. How she'd shown up flustered, anxious, and insisted on rushing the paperwork. The nurse even remembered a typo Sophie had corrected on the spot, something I would never have let through. It was enough. Enough to file a formal complaint. Enough to scare the clinic into internal review. While that was in motion, I went after her finances. I had helped Sophie with bills before. Rent, daycare, groceries. I knew her banking info. Knew her weaknesses. I started tracing her credit cards. Tracked down old emails. Found proof of forged purchases, including one shady transfer to a private lab around the time of Lily's conception. Then came the final blow. I hacked into the cloud storage Sophie had forgotten was synced to her old iPad, one she'd left in a drawer at our parents' place. It was all there. Photos of my medical documents. Scanned forms. Her handwriting on forged signatures. Even a selfie she'd taken outside the clinic the day of the embryo transfer, smiling, holding her stomach, captioned, "Everything's finally falling into place." I sent it all to my lawyer. But I didn't stop there. I printed the photos, the forms, the DNA report, and I mailed them, anonymously to her job, HR department, Lily's school, my parents, her ex-boyfriends, our family group chat. Then I waited. The fallout was nuclear. Her work put her on immediate leave. My parents were horrified. She tried to spin it, said I was unstable, lying, desperate, but the documents were undeniable. Screenshots don't lie. I got a call from Lily's school principal the next week. He said Lily had mentioned Aunt Emma being my real mom. He asked if we could meet. That was when I knew Sophie's grip was slipping. The world was finally seeing the truth. But I wasn't finished. I still had one card left to play. And it would destroy everything Sophie had built. Revenge isn't loud. It isn't a scream or a shattered window. Revenge is quiet. It's the slow burn of realization. The cold weight of truth landing like a stone in someone's chest. It's watching the life someone built on stolen ground crumble piece by piece, while you sip your tea and smile. And Sophie? Sophie was crumbling. I saw it in her eyes the last time I showed up at her door. Her skin was pale, her eyes puffy, and her usual swagger gone. She didn't open the door with her usual dramatic flair. She didn't smile. She didn't pretend. "Emma," she said, barely above a whisper. I tilted my head. "I thought we could talk." She stepped aside and let me in. The house was a mess. Mail unopened. Dishes piled. Toys scattered across the floor like forgotten memories. Lily wasn't home, thank God. I had timed it that way. I knew Sophie's schedule by heart. Knew when Lily was at art class, when Sophie usually curled up on the couch with a glass of wine and her regret. I sat down. She didn't. "I know what you've been doing," she said bitterly. "Good," I replied calmly. "It means it's working." Her lip curled. "Why? Why are you doing this?" "You said you wanted time. You stole 5 years of my life." I cut her off. "You think you deserve time?" She opened her mouth, but I held up my hand. "No more lies, Sophie. You stole my child. You built a fantasy life around my pain. And now you're watching that life fall apart, and you're asking why?" Her voice shook. "You're hurting her too. Don't you see that? She's just a child." "I know," I whispered. "That's the part that keeps me awake. That she'll suffer because of your selfishness, not mine." She sank into the armchair across from me, looking suddenly so small, so broken. "You were always the strong one," she muttered. "No," I said, shaking my head. "I was the one who played fair. There's a difference." The silence that followed stretched heavy between us, a silence thick with shared blood and shattered trust. Then she said something unexpected. "I loved her, Emma. From the moment I found out I was pregnant. I didn't plan for it to go this way, but once she was here, I couldn't give her up. She wasn't yours to keep." "I know," she whispered, eyes glassy. "But I didn't know how to fix it. Every day, I wanted to tell you, but I saw how broken you were. And I thought, maybe this way, at least she's in your life." Maybe that was enough. I stared at her, stunned. Enough? You thought watching my child grow up calling someone else mom would be enough for me? Tears fell down her cheeks. She didn't respond. And in that moment, something shifted in me. I expected to feel satisfaction, to see her cry, to watch her destroyed. But instead, all I felt was exhaustion. I stood up. I'm not here for your guilt, Sophie, I said. I'm here to fix what you broke. She looked up at me with hollow eyes. You're taking her away, aren't you? Wouldn't you? I asked. She didn't answer, because she knew the truth. But taking Lily away wouldn't be simple. Not legally. Not emotionally. She wasn't just a biological fact. She was a person. A 5-year-old girl with memories and bedtime stories and hugs. And to her, Sophie was mom. No amount of paperwork could erase that bond. So I didn't go to court right away. Instead, I did something much harder. I started winning Lily over. Gently, naturally. I volunteered more at her school. I took her to the zoo, to ballet recitals, to bookstores. I asked her questions. I told her stories from when I was little. I paid attention. One night, while I was tucking her into bed after a sleepover, she looked up at me with those wide blue eyes and said, Aunt Emma, how come we look the same? I paused. What do you mean, sweetheart? Our hair, our eyes, my smile. Mommy says I'm lucky I look like you. I smiled softly. Maybe it's because we're both very special. She blinked slowly, sleepy. If I had 2 moms, would that be weird? My breath caught. I swallowed. No, I whispered. It would be very lucky. She nodded, then turned over, clutching her stuffed bear. I'd want you to be my other mom. That night, I cried in my car for hours. It was working. She was starting to feel what I'd always known deep down. We were connected. In a way no lie could destroy. But not everyone took it well. My parents were furious at Sophie. They hadn't believed it at first. How could they? But once they saw the documents, the emails, the DNA test, they were devastated. My mother called me one night and said, I feel like I failed both my daughters. I didn't know what to say to that. But my father? He was silent. And then, without warning, he cut Sophie off. No calls. No visits. Nothing. She took something from you, he told me. And I won't forgive that. Sophie spiraled. Her job didn't renew her contract after her leave. Her landlord raised her rent. Friends stopped inviting her places. Whispers followed her like shadows. She was the woman who stole her sister's child. No one knew all the details, but what they knew was enough. She called me one night, drunk and sobbing. You win, okay? Are you happy now? No, I said calmly. Not yet. Emma, she slurred, please. You've already ruined me. No, Sophie, I replied. You ruined you. I just pulled back the curtain. She hung up on me. That was the last time she ever called. Then one day, Lily came to me with a question that shattered what was left of the old life. She was coloring quietly at the kitchen table when she said, Why did Mommy lie? I froze. What do you mean? She held up a crayon drawing, a picture of me and her, holding hands. She said you were just my aunt. But I heard Grandma say something about you being my real mom. I knelt beside her, heart pounding. Lily. She looked at me, so serious, so grown. Are you my mom? It was the moment I'd feared and prayed for. I took her hands in mine. I am. I didn't get to raise you the way I wanted. But yes, sweetheart, I am. She was quiet. Then she asked, Do I have to stop loving Mommy now? Tears stung my eyes. No, you can love both of us. Your heart is big enough. She crawled into my lap and hugged me tighter than she ever had before. That night, I knew. It was time. I filed the custody petition the next morning. And this time, I had everything. The medical records, the DNA proof, witness testimonies, financial records, even the clinic statement confirming identity fraud. Sophie was charged, though the sentence was minor, fines, a sealed record, community service. But it was enough. And the court ruled in my favor. Full legal custody. Lily was finally mine. The day I took her home, really home, I stood in her new room, surrounded by lavender paint and twinkly fairy lights, and watched her twirl in her princess dress. "This is my real room now, right?" she asked. "Yes," I smiled. "Forever." Winning custody should have felt like the ending. Like the big, triumphant finale where the music swells, the villain is defeated, and the hero walks off into the sunset with everything she lost finally restored. But that's the thing about real life. It doesn't tie itself into a pretty bow. Because even after I brought Lily home, even after I tucked her into bed in a room filled with stars and lullabies and her favorite stuffed animals, I couldn't sleep. Not because I had regrets, but because I wasn't done. Sophie had destroyed years of my life. Years I could never get back. She had lived as a mother to my child while I grieved in silence. She had smiled in family photos while I swallowed envy and heartbreak. And then, when the truth came out, she cried victim, as if this had just happened to her. She had to feel it. Really feel it. Not just legally. Not just in whispers and shame. I wanted her to feel the emptiness I'd carried. The isolation. The disbelief. The agony of losing something you love so deeply it defines your whole existence. And so, I built my final act. I started by making Sophie invisible. You see, she lived for attention. She always had. The spotlight had been her oxygen, her addiction, her safety blanket. If people liked her, she felt real. She felt seen. So I decided to smother that light completely. She'd already been dropped from her corporate job after the scandal. But I wasn't satisfied with her simply getting fired. I wanted her entire reputation scorched. I created a blog, a clean, professionally written site that told a true story of medical betrayal. I didn't use our names, but I didn't have to. People figured it out. Fast. I released one chapter every week. One confession, one new piece of evidence. One more damning email, photo, or legal document. It went viral within a month. People weren't just outraged, they were hooked. It was the kind of betrayal that made headlines. And even though Sophie's name was never printed, the people in our circle knew. Her former colleagues, her friends, our family, they all knew. She started getting hate messages. People crossed the street to avoid her. She showed up at church one Sunday and someone asked her, loudly, how it felt to steal a baby from her own sister. Her world got smaller and colder. She moved out of her apartment, too many neighbors, whispering. She blocked everyone on social media. She changed her number. She had no job, no money, no friends. But still, that wasn't enough. Because I knew something else. Something she didn't realize I had access to. Her diary. Remember that old iPad she left behind at my parents' place? The one synced to her cloud. It had her entire journal. Every entry. And deep in those private, raw paragraphs, she wrote things she never meant anyone to see. One entry stayed with me more than any other. I used to think Emma was so lucky. But now I have Lily. And I finally feel like I matter. Like I've done one thing right. If Emma ever finds out, I'll lose everything. But I still don't regret it. Because for once, someone calls me mom. It should have made me angry. But all it made me feel was pity. And that pity? That's when I knew I'd already won. Because the real revenge wasn't her being humiliated. It was her being alone. It was the silence of a life emptied out. But still, I had one final blow to deliver. Something Sophie could never undo. The blog had exploded. People were asking for interviews, podcasts, op-eds. But I didn't want the fame. I wanted the legacy. So I launched a nonprofit, funded anonymously, through some savings and a quiet investor friend. It was called Second Light, an organization supporting women who had faced medical fraud, fertility exploitation, or reproductive coercion. In the very first campaign, we shared a video. It didn't show my face, but it showed my voice. And I told my story. Start to finish. People listened, donated, shared it like wildfire. The blog got picked up by news outlets. The clinic involved faced lawsuits and had to settle with multiple patients after an internal audit revealed more cases of donor mismanagement. And Sophie? She tried to apply for a job at a nearby clinic. I got an alert through LinkedIn. She had applied for a medical admin role. I forwarded the employer the blog. She didn't get the job. She never would again. Meanwhile, Lily was flourishing. She asked more questions, gently, bravely, and I answered everyone. She wanted to know how I was her real mom. I told her in child-safe words. She asked why Sophie lied. I said, because sometimes people do very wrong things when they're scared. But that doesn't make it okay. She still loved Sophie. I didn't take that from her. But slowly, her home became mine. Her bedtime stories were mine. Her report cards. Her scraped knees. Her hugs. One day, I went to pick her up from school. Her art teacher handed me a drawing. A house, a sun, two stick figures. One labeled me, the other my real mom, Emma. I cried in the car again that day. But this time, they were tears of healing. Of return. I didn't hear from Sophie again. Not directly. But I saw her one more time. It was a year later. Lily and I were at a carnival. She was riding the carousel, her face lit up with joy and wind, and I stood there smiling, taking it all in. Then I saw Sophie. Alone. Standing behind a food truck, hoodie pulled over her head, her eyes sunken and tired. She was watching from a distance. I didn't move. Neither did she. Our eyes met, and in that split second, there was no fight left in her. No apology. No rage. Just emptiness. She turned and walked away. That was the moment I let go. For the first time in years, life was quiet. Not empty, peaceful. Lily and I settled into routines that felt like rituals. Morning pancakes, matching pajamas, Friday movie nights on the couch. Our little world had warmth now. Real warmth. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. The nonprofit took off faster than I'd expected. We got grants, media coverage, invitations to speak. Women reached out from all over the country, sharing their own stories of fertility theft, surrogacy fraud, and unthinkable betrayals. I listened to them all. Because I understood. Because I had lived it. But as my new life blossomed, part of me remained guarded. Suspicious. Because betrayal that deep doesn't leave quietly. It lingers. It scratches at your ribs at night. Even when the world goes still, you remember the scream you never got to release. I hadn't heard from Sophie in nearly a year. Until one day. I did. It was a letter. No name on the envelope, no return address. Just my name, written in jagged handwriting I'd know anywhere. Sophie. I hesitated before opening it. Part of me wanted to toss it into the fire. But curiosity won. Inside was a single page. You won. I know that now. I was wrong. About everything. I thought I could fix my life by stealing yours, but it only hollowed me out. Every day since you took Lily home, I've tried to find meaning in something else. I failed. So I'm giving you everything I should have years ago. Turn the page over. Confused, I flipped the page. It wasn't blank. It was a birth certificate. Lily's. But this one was different. I stared, confused. There, listed under Mother, was Sophie's name. And mine, both. I blinked. That wasn't legally possible. Was it a mistake? Then I noticed something handwritten across the bottom. This was the first draft I forged. Before I had the courage to erase you completely. I sat back, heart pounding. She had almost told the truth. Almost. And then she'd buried it again. My hands trembled as I turned back to the first page. There was one more thing, taped to the bottom. A tiny, folded photograph. It was from the day Lily was born. Me, asleep in a hospital chair. Lily, swaddled in Sophie's arms. And Sophie, looking straight into the camera. The caption on the back read, "She looked like you from the beginning." I just pretended she didn't. I didn't know what to feel. Guilt? Sadness? Pity? But mostly, I felt like a chapter had closed. Not perfectly. Not cleanly. But finally. 6 months later, I received a phone call from a county office in Oregon. A woman said she was calling to confirm details from a medical records request connected to a Sophie Maddox. I hesitated. I'm not sure why you need me for that. She paused. Then said, Ma'am, I'm sorry. We found your number listed as next of kin. I felt the floor drop. Why? There's been an incident. Sophie was found unconscious in a motel outside Portland. Pills. Alcohol. A suicide attempt. She'd left no note, just a name. Mine. They saved her. But barely. She was in a psychiatric recovery program now, under 72-hour supervision. I drove up the next day. Not because I had to, but because I needed to see her. They let me in under visitation terms. She was pale, hollow-eyed. Her hair was shorter, uneven, like she'd hacked it off herself. But she looked up at me and whispered, You came. I sat down across from her. I did. She stared at her hands. I didn't do it to get your attention. I know. I didn't want to die, she said. I just wanted everything to stop hurting. We sat in silence. Then she said something I didn't expect. I wrote a letter to Lily, for when she's older. My spine stiffened. I didn't give it to her. I left it with the clinic. They'll send it when she turns 16. I didn't say I was her mother. I just told her I loved her. And I'm sorry. I didn't speak. Couldn't. Then she looked at me. Really looked. Do you hate me? I thought about it. About everything she stole. Every lie. Every sleepless night. And then I said, softly, No, but I don't forgive you either. She nodded. I wouldn't either. I stood to leave. She didn't ask for a hug. I didn't offer one. Weeks later, I received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a USB. I plugged it in. There was only one file. A video. It was Sophie, sitting in a dark room, talking directly to the camera. Hi, Lily. If you're watching this, you're older now. Maybe old enough to understand why some people lie. Even when they love someone. I was wrong. About so many things. But I never stopped loving you. I just didn't know how to be honest, and still keep you. Emma is your mother. Not just by blood, but by heart. And if you ever wonder who really wanted you, it was her. Always her. I hope someday when you read all of this, you don't feel hate. Just understanding. And I hope you know I'm sorry. Then she looked into the camera, eyes wet. You were never mine to keep. But I loved you anyway. The screen went black. Years passed. Lily grew. Blossomed. She asked fewer questions about Sophie as time went on. Until one day, at 16, she came into my room holding the letter. And the USB. I got this today, she said. My chest tightened. She sat on my bed and looked at me. She was messed up, Lily said. But she loved me. She did, I replied. And I think, in her own way, she thought she was doing what was best. Lily leaned her head on my shoulder. You're my mom, she said. No one else ever was. I wrapped my arms around her. No more secrets. No more lies. Just the truth. Finally free. And that's how it ends. Or maybe. That's how it begins. Because sometimes revenge isn't about destruction. It's about reclamation. It's about stealing back what was stolen and planting something new in the ruins. Something stronger. Something real.